Today on Blue World, Jonathan explores the longest submerged cave in the world. But first, the whole family dives a wreck off Grand Cayman. Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
It's spring break, so the family and I are heading out on a dive adventure. We take off from gloomy Boston and land in beautiful Grand Cayman. We're staying at Sunset House, one of the premier dive resorts on an island known around the world for its fabulous diving. Grand Cayman is located in the Caribbean, south of Cuba. The family and I have had some fabulous dives. We've seen lots of marine life, healthy reefs, and of course, we've played with stingrays. But today we're heading out on another adventure. Jasmine and Phil ready the boat for a special dive we've been looking forward to doing. It's a short boat ride to the site, but we have time to set up our gear and get ready. Phil gives us a briefing for our dive on the wreck of the Kittiwake.
1.6 feet long. It was born in...
The USS Kittiwake was a 251-foot-long submarine rescue vessel which served for 50 years in the U.S. Navy, eventually being decommissioned in 1994. In 2011, it was intentionally sunk as an artificial reef on Grand Cayman. If the Kittiwake sounds familiar, it may be because of this guy.
Jake! Hi! How you doing, man?
8 years ago, we got a young fan named Jake, scuba certified, and took him to Grand Cayman on an adventure. The first dive we did together after he got his certification was the Kittiwake. At the time, it was a brand new wreck, having been sunk only months before. 8 years later, things have changed. Originally, it was nearly upright. But after 8 years of storms, the wreck has tipped on its side. The family and I sink down and start exploring at the stern, checking out the giant propeller. Back when Jake and I dove here, the prop was completely out of the sand. But now the ship has settled so much that one blade of the prop is completely buried. We swim up and over the wreck and into the ship. Because there are so many openings, you're never out of sight of an exit, so this is completely safe for experienced divers like us. Because the ship is tilted on its side, it gives divers a weird vertigo. My brain has a hard time interpreting which way is up, but Elisa's bubbles go straight up. In the engine room, we can find one of the V12 engine blocks that once powered the ship. Eventually, Liam leads the way up through the smokestack back into the blue. Back when Jake and I dove the Kittiwake, the wreck was so new that there was barely any marine growth. But now the ship is covered in red encrusting sponges, coral, and algae. Jake had a great time playing with the wheel on the bridge as if he was driving the ship. Now the wheel's covered in growth that Elise doesn't want to touch. And the bridge itself has been torn off by storms. Liam isn't afraid of the marine growth. We follow Jasmine, and she points out the water cannon which was used for fighting fires on other boats. It has some stinging hydroids on it, so Liam isn't sure he wants to touch it. Elise takes a break on the cargo boom, because diving is really tiring, and there's a great view. But Christine found something you don't normally see on a wreck. A grouper is actually visiting a cleaning station behind a ladder. It takes him a while to get used to my presence, but once he decides I'm not a threat, he opens his mouth to allow tiny cleaner gobies to clean his teeth. It's an unspoken rule of the sea. Nobody eats the cleaner fish. Eventually, the cleaning is over and the grouper heads out. We take a cue from the fish and head back to the surface.
That dive was amazing. The ship on its side makes everything so much cooler.
Man, the wreck is so much more interesting than it was in 2009. Not only is the tilt just really spooky and cool, but just the whole atmosphere of the wreck has gotten much more, I can't really describe it, like ethereal. Just swimming through it is so much fun. I'm betting the kids had a blast.
In the 8 years since I last dove the Kittiwake, the wreck has changed significantly. It has tilted on its side, sunk into the sand, lost some of its superstructure, and grown more marine life. But all of these changes have only made the wreck more interesting to dive. It's more colorful, more fun, and there's more to see. Like a fine wine, wrecks usually get better with age, and the Kittiwake is no exception. The jungle of the Yucatan is filled with mysteries and adventure. For miles and miles, it's only trees, with no sign of rivers or lakes. But there are rivers. They flow underground through vast cave systems. In a few places, the ceiling of the cave has collapsed, creating cenotes, entrances to the cave systems. In one cenote, called Zapote, we explored unusual formations called cave bells, formed by bacteria. But the toxic hydrogen sulfide layer prevented us from going too deep to explore much of the cave. About an hour drive away from Zapote is another cenote. This one will allow us to really explore. Cameraman Todd and I are on an epic adventure to the Yucatan of Mexico. Of course, whenever we go cave diving in the Yucatan, we meet up with our good friend Christine Lowe, an experienced local cave diving instructor who knows all the good spots. And our adventure begins on a nice, smooth dirt road into the jungle.
Hello.
Soon we arrive at Cenote Nohoch. The owners of the cenote have built a bit of a tourist attraction around it. with an observation tower and some zip lines. But for us, it's all about the diving. Nohoch Nah Chich, which means giant bird cage, is a cave system that stretches over 42 miles and has 36 different cenotes providing access. Cenote Nohoch is right in the center of the whole thing. And we're definitely not going to see much of this huge system in one dive.
And we're also going to dive in that direction.
Christine walks us through the facilities. Then we review the dive plan.
So a little Mayan lesson, Nohoch Nah Chich means giant bird cage.
Giant bird cage? How cool is that? This is my place, baby! Because there are so many different routes, we have to make a careful plan on where we're going and what is involved. But we can't dive until all the gear is ready. This is a popular place for cave divers, so they have a really nice setup. Finally, the fun part.
You gotta get your mask just right, because once you put your helmet on, you can't really adjust it.
Then we follow Christine down into the crystal clear water. As we prepare to leave the cavern zone, where we can see light from the sun, Christine ties off a line. The permanent cave lines start a few hundred feet further into the cave to keep open water divers from following them. So we start with our own line that leads from there back to the cavern zone. Since every dive team places their own line from the main line back out of the cave, each team always knows when there are other divers in the cave. Reaching the main line, Christine ties our team's reel to the line. Then she places a marker called a cookie on the line. That marker has her name on it, so nobody else will take it out by mistake. Nohoch is known as one of the most beautiful caves in the Yucatan with good reason. Everywhere we look, there are gorgeous formations. In some areas, we're very shallow, and the water doesn't completely fill the cave, so there are huge air pockets above our heads. In theory, you could stick your head up in there and have a conversation. However, since these air pockets don't directly connect to the air outside the cave, there's no way of knowing if the air is safe to breathe. But it looks cool, like an upside-down puddle above our heads. As we swim weightlessly through these winding passages, it's hard to believe that 15,000 years ago, these passages were dry. Back then, during the last ice age, sea levels were much lower, so the water table in the jungle was lower too. These caves were bone dry. We could have walked through this cave back then. And the evidence is here. Formations hanging from the ceiling, called stalactites, were created by dripping water, almost like icicles of stone. When the dripping water hit the floor of the cave, the result was stalagmites. And as those two formations grow, they can meet in the middle, forming a column. Soon we reach our first jump. We're going to leave the main line and go down a side passage. So we have to make what is called a jump over to another line. The side passages already have permanent lines in them, but they don't connect to the main line because that can be confusing. So we put our own line between them, temporarily. Christine ties a spool to the main line. Then we swim across the jump and tie on to the line on the side passage. When we return, this jump line ensures that we can find the main line again. This is one of the unbreakable rules of cave diving. Never be out of sight of the line that leads all the way to the entrance. Soon we come into an amazing room filled with crazy formations known as helictites. Helictites are thin little whisker-like formations that go sideways off the drip formations. Nobody's quite sure how they form. For a long time, the prevailing theory was that they're formed by wind blowing dripping water sideways. But more recent evidence suggests that surface tension caused by a special kind of bacteria may be the cause. Either way, they grow in a dry cave, not a submerged cave. As we keep going, Christine leads us through very large rooms. The crystal clear water flows beneath the forest, the lifeblood of the Yucatan. And most of the time, we're no deeper than 30 feet. Just above our heads, a thick tropical jungle. While some of the formations are opaque, some of them allow light to pass, like a flashlight behind a finger. Our goal is to leave nothing but bubbles and pristine cave behind. A beautiful flowstone formation reminds me of a waterfall, frozen in time, sculpted in stone. A formation like this takes thousands of years to form. Finally, it's time to turn back. Another firm rule of cave diving is that you can only use 1/3 of your air to get into the cave. You use another third to get back. That leaves the last third for unexpected delays. Soon we get back to the jump, and Christine spools up her jump line as we cross back to the main line. The arrows point the way out, because obviously following the line in the wrong direction would be disastrous. People think cave divers are nuts, but look at the things we get to see. As we swim back to the entrance, and it's a long swim, I have time to think about how far this cave goes. We swam only a half a mile into a cave which is 42 miles long. But a few years ago, cave explorers linked this cave to another huge system called Sak Aktun. Then they linked Sak Aktun to a system called Dos Ojos. These three systems together are now the longest underwater cave in the world, stretching 215 miles. And with that humbling fact in mind, finally we make it back to the cavern zone where we can see the light from the sun. Fortunately, we never went deeper than 30 feet, so even though our dive was 2 hours long, we have no decompression to do.
Wow! Man, that was great. Stunning.
What a gorgeous environment that is.
My lower back is like on fire.
I feel incredibly lucky to have visited Nohoch Nah Chich. Never mind the fact that I can brag about diving the longest known submerged cave in the world. It's just a beautiful cave with crystal clear water, almost no current, and shallow enough to stay for hours. Indeed, a treasure of the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
And so, I've brought the entire family on a Grand Cayman adventure for a week of exciting diving.
That's perfect. Cut.
I love being on location in the tropics. It's fabulous. But it's also nice to know that I've got someone at home holding down the fort and doing the editing. I better call and check in on Zach.
Blue World Studios.
Hey, Zach, how's the editing going?
Oh, it's a thrill a minute.
Well, I'm really sorry that you're chained to a desk at home, but hey, you know, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I'm taking care of it.
All right, well, I'll see you when I get back.
Okay.
Later.
Bye. One of these days I'll get certified.
Hey, Zach, you here?
In here.
Meet Zach Peterson, also known around the Blue World headquarters as Zach of all trades. We call him that because he has multiple roles. He films above the water in the field, he shoots our aerials, and he's our lead editor back in the office. But the one thing he doesn't do is scuba dive. Blue World has a lot of underwater camera people, and the last thing we need is another diver on the team. But when we were in Grand Cayman recently, Zach got to try scuba diving with a Discover Scuba class. This is a scuba diving mini class where you can try it out and decide if you like it before you commit to taking the whole course. You do a little bit in the pool, and then go for a supervised ocean dive.
Now, I know Jonathan says he doesn't need another scuba diver, but what does he know?
So when we got home, cameraman Zach busted me out of the office, and we headed over to East Coast Divers in Brookline, Massachusetts.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm Dan.
I'm Zach.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Welcome to East Coast.
Thank you.
Ready to get started?
You have the paperwork ready for him?
Yeah. Let's take it to the back class.
Alrighty.
Meanwhile, back at the office, I'm thinking, I need a thicker chain.
So welcome to the East Coast Diver Classroom.
Thank you for having me. So this is our classroom.
Usually, the classroom is full, but I'm lucky enough to get a private class from cameraman Zach, who is also a scuba instructor.
We have 1 atmosphere of pressure.
The classroom sessions are not as exciting as the other parts of the course, but it's important to understand the physiology of diving and its effects on the body in order to stay safe underwater. In the classroom, we learn about the effects of pressure and buoyancy, how the equipment works, as well as the rules and regulations around the sport.
So all the tests coming up, we're going to ask questions. Someone's going to say, what is the absolute pressure?
Now it's time to take the written test, and I'm a little nervous. It would be embarrassing to fail. Jonathan would never let me live it down.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Question 1.
Yep.
What do you get?
B.
Correct. Question 2.
18. D.
19.
48. C.
49.
B.
50.
A.
Awesome.
How many did you get wrong?
3.
You passed!
The next part of the course involves actual water.
So we're on our way over to the pool for his pool session of the day. Are you excited?
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's gonna be good. So today I'm gonna be cameraman, not host.
The pool session starts with a swim test. I have to float for 5 minutes.
Oh man, talk about easy. Back in my day, we had to tread water for 2 hours.
Now, I have to set up my own gear. Zach will check to see if I did it right. Once he is satisfied that my gear is correctly assembled, he puts his together. We help each other get our tanks on, and that's when I learn it's always better to be last so you aren't lifting a tank while you are wearing one. The giant stride entry is the most common way to jump off a boat or a dock, but you need to be sure to step far enough out so that you don't hit your tank. So we practice.
Very nice.
Before we submerge, we practice techniques for towing an exhausted dive buddy.
If I need to, I can get away from you very quickly.
Finally, it's time to breathe underwater. Releasing the air from our buoyancy compensators, we sink slowly into weightlessness. For most divers, this is the first time that they ever get to experience breathing underwater, so we spend a few minutes just having fun and getting the hang of it. For many people taking a dive class, this is the moment they have been waiting for, and it's really exciting. But after a while, it's time to get down to business. Diving in the ocean, it's easy to get your mask kicked off by accident, so it's important to learn how to put it back on without a panic. It's easy. Just replace the mask, tilt your head back, and blow through your nose to fill it back up with air. Scuba divers have their own type of sign language for communicating things like tank pressure and decompression time. I have to demonstrate that I know how to do it. This is the sign for a safety stop. And this is what divers do on a safety stop. A little game of rock seaweed dive knife. It's pretty rare that a diver would ever need to remove gear like this underwater, but practicing how to do it builds confidence in using the equipment under different circumstances. Zach has a whole checklist of skills that I have to practice and demonstrate. One of the most important is the out-of-air scenario, where Zach pretends he is out of air and I have to give him a regulator and find my backup.
Check out the dugong roll, critical move.
After a couple of fun hours in the pool, I'm all finished with my pool portion of the course.
So we're switching jobs now, huh?
Now is the moment of truth. We head up to Folly Cove in beautiful Cape Ann, Massachusetts, where I will complete 3 dives under supervision and test my skills in the ocean. We're diving from shore, which is a little more work than a boat dive, but we can take our time and go at a relaxed pace. Zach has many dives here in Folly Cove, so he gives me a rundown on the layout.
Then we'll hang a left. We'll have you navigate. We'll swim up. We can have you take a compass heading as well. You actually use your compass.
The water is chilly, but the air is hot. Once we put on our warm suits, we need to get in the water quickly or we'll overheat. The entry here can be tricky because the big rocks are slippery and it's easy to trip. Cold water actually feels really good. On the bottom, the visibility is not as good as in the pool. We start with a navigation test, using a compass to follow a heading. Next, I have to recover a lost regulator. But it's hidden in plain sight. So, I try again. The mask removal is different in the ocean. First, it's hard to feel what you're doing with thick gloves. But also, the water is cold, and it's a shock when it hits your face. after completing my skills, I can spend some time exploring. And even though the visibility is not that good, there's a lot of great stuff to see. A horseshoe crab cruises along the seafloor. I've always wondered why they have a long pointy tail. Now I realize it's not a weapon, it's a tool. Flounders are flatfish, normally found blending into the sand. But this guy has found a little spot near some algae and turned red to blend in better. Flounders lay on their sides and have both eyes on one side of the head as an adaptation for life in this habitat. I come across a crab with a poofy orange ball on its underside.
That's a female rock crab carrying a big brood of eggs.
She carries them around to keep them safe until they hatch, and the tiny planktonic hatchlings float away in the current.
After a whole day of diving Folly Cove, I'm pretty chilly, but I am finished with my scuba class and I'm officially a certified scuba diver.
Well,
are you certified?
Yes, you passed, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're now a certified diver.
Woo. All right.
Sorry about your job with Jonathan.
Let's go somewhere warm.
Let's do it.
Learning how to scuba dive is not as difficult as I thought it would be. There are 3 basic parts. You learn the science and the rules in the classroom. Then you learn the skills in the pool. And finally, you put it all together in open water. The whole process can be completed in only a couple of weeks. Now that I'm certified, I can't wait to go on adventures and see with my own eyes what life looks like in the blue world.
Oh, don't get carried away there, Zach. I think you got to get back to the edit suite now.
As you probably know, I'm a professional underwater cinematographer. My favorite thing to film is Blue World, because I get to go anywhere I want and film whatever we find. It's a great adventure. But I work on a lot of other projects. I do freelance underwater work for television and movies. I work on giant screen films for IMAX theaters and even special exhibits for museums. If it's underwater, my team and I can film it. And today, Zach and I are on one such assignment. We've come to Florida to attempt to shoot a scene for a client featuring a diver and a goliath grouper to illustrate how large they are. Yes, we've come here for just one single very important shot.
Well, I'm down in beautiful sunny Florida, the Sunshine State, because we heard that there's a wreck called the Castor that has a friendly Goliath grouper. So we're gonna go check it out.
We head on down to the Boynton Harbor Marina in Boynton Beach, where we'll be boarding the Loggerhead, a local dive charter boat. We start the day in the traditional scuba diver way, schlepping our gear. My buddy Dave Oakes of Aqua Safari Adventures has organized the shoot and will be modeling in the shots, if we can find the grouper. Soon we'll leave the dock and make our way offshore. When we reach the wreck, we're barely more than a mile offshore. Zach and I start suiting up.
That suit is so cold. We are ready. Ready to dive.
First, Dave is going to help us find the grouper and then do his thing as the fish whisperer. We hit the water and start down to the wreck. The MV Castor lies in 110 feet of water. It's a 240-foot-long freighter that was seized by the Coast Guard in 1999 because it was carrying 10,000 pounds of cocaine hidden in a shipment of sugar. In 2001, Palm Beach County's Artificial Reef Program sank the ship to create an oasis for marine life. Over the years, hurricanes have broken the ship up a bit, but that doesn't reduce its appeal to the fish. The big stern section stands up high off the bottom, and a couple of goliath grouper like to hang around. It's easy to see why. The ship looks like a fish condo complex with all kinds of great places to hide both inside and outside. Soon we set out to find a friendly grouper known as Wilbur. Because the ship is at an angle, everything looks a little odd. A crooked staircase. A lopsided air intake. The wreck has grown a lovely coral garden. And this, clearly someone's science experiment. No idea what that is. I take a swim down a long hallway looking for Wilbur. No sign of him. I'm starting to get worried that he isn't home. But when I pop out the other end, there he is, waiting for us. Wilbur isn't shy. He allows me to swim right up and film him at close range. He isn't even bothered by my bright lights. He knows that divers come to visit the wreck all the time and they won't hurt him. Cue the model. Now it's Dave's job to get in the shot for scale. But he notices something disturbing. Wilbur has a hook and a piece of fishing line in his mouth. And he seems to know that Dave will be able to help. Wilbur allows Dave to cut the line. The hook is in deep, but it will rust and fall out. In the meantime, getting rid of the line will keep Wilbur from getting it tangled in something until the hook comes out. I don't know if Wilbur knows that Dave was trying to help him, but he certainly seems like Dave is his new best friend. Wilbur really likes this one spot of the wreck covered in beautiful orange cup corals. And with the silhouette of the ship in the background, it's just a great shot. This is the kind of cooperative marine life we underwater cinematographers dream about, but rarely get. In fact, I think Wilbur's a better model than Dave. Every once in a while, Wilbur comes over to check me out too. I'm pretty sure he could eat my entire camera, so I'm keeping a firm grip on it. Finally, Wilbur and Dave both get into a good position and I have my perfect shot. You can't ask for more than that. That's a wrap. And it's perfect timing because down here at almost 100 feet, we're already into some decompression, so it's time to go. We ascend slowly to our deco stop at 15 feet, where I have 10 minutes of obligated decompression before I can go any shallower. This allows my body to get rid of some of the nitrogen in my blood before I go all the way to the lower pressure at the surface. It's kind of boring just floating here, but at least it's easy. Finally, my dive computer gives me the green light so I can ascend and swim back to the boat.
That was fantastic. We found Wilbur, the world's most friendly Goliath grouper, and Dave is like the fish whisperer, and we got a great shot. So it was a wonderful wreck, and it delivered.
Being an underwater cinematographer is not always easy. But every once in a while I get lucky with nice weather, nice water conditions, and cooperative marine life. And when that happens, it truly is a great day in the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Lake Champlain, comprising almost 500 square miles, is the 13th largest lake in the United States. It's a boater's paradise. But the lake is large enough that storms have sunk hundreds of vessels over the years, making it a popular scuba diving destination too. Lake Champlain spans the border between Vermont and New York State and stretches up into Canada. In colonial times, the lake was used as a water highway between the St. Lawrence and Hudson valleys. But because it also provided direct access from British-controlled Canada, it was of strategic importance to colonial America, both to defend borders and for trade. As the area became more settled, a certain type of vessel called a canal schooner became the standard for hauling cargo to the area. Today, I'm heading to beautiful Burlington, Vermont with Zach of all trades, cameraman Zach, and Annalise, our new assistant diver. We arrive at Waterfront Diving Center, the local dive experts. And apparently we're early.
It's locked!
Eventually, owner Jonathan Eddy lets us in, and we meet our dive master, Sheila Cooley.
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Next, we unpack all our gear. It's not a huge boat, so it's easier to set our gear up at the shop. The boat is a few hundred meters away, so we load our gear in the shop truck. And then it's time for a dive briefing on today's adventure.
All right, so 2 dives is the plan. So the O.J. Walker and the General Butler, these are historical sailing canal barge boats.
Then we don our dry suits and walk on down to the boat. Sheila brings the gear. At the waterfront, Captain Larry has brought what looks like a World War II landing craft right up on the boat ramp. This comfortable vessel will be our diving platform for the next 3 days. It's a bit overcast and windy, but the breakwater protects the marina from the lake waves. Outside the breakwater, waves are crashing on the bow and splashing us, so it's time to finish suiting up.
Oh yeah, I'm so fashionable.
With the landing craft style front gate down, it's an easy giant stride entry. Or something like that. Like most lakes, Champlain is not exactly known for crystal clear water, but during the summer, the surface is quite warm. It's over 70 degrees, and I'm wondering why I brought a dry suit. But 65 feet down at the mooring, it's quite a bit colder, 45 degrees, and I'm glad for the dry suit. We follow the guideline from the mooring to the wreck of the O.J. Walker. The O.J. Walker is a historically significant wreck that's part of the Lake Champlain Underwater Historic Preserve. The wreck is covered in zebra mussels. These invasive mollusks coat much of the wreck, including the bow. There's a deadeye on the bow, shimmering in the thermocline. There's also an anchor on the bow, a bit camouflaged in zebra mussels. This canal schooner sank during a severe storm in the spring of 1895. So it doesn't look too bad at all for a 125-year-old wooden vessel. The holds are filled with a century's worth of silt. Swimming down the wreck, we reach one of the masts, damaged but still in place. There's a sign reminding divers that as part of the Underwater Historic Preserve, divers are not allowed to penetrate the wreck because it's so fragile. I'm swimming along a spectacular piece of American history as I make my way back to the most famous part of the wreck. The ship's wheel is still upright. It's missing a few pieces, but still looks like it could steer the boat. And the wheel was connected to the rudder, which is in good shape, planted into the mud. The O.J. Walker had a working career of 33 years hauling heavy cargoes. When she sank, she had a load of bricks and ceramics, which can still be seen on the wreck. Supplies can be transported by water from New York City all the way to Lake Champlain via a system of locks that connect Champlain to the Hudson River. When a river has a large elevation change, the result is either a waterfall or a section of rapids, neither of which is possible to navigate in a large boat. To get around that, you can build a system of locks, which basically creates an elevator for boats. By controlling the water level in the locks, you can raise boats to sail upstream, or lower them to sail downstream. Between the Hudson River and Lake Champlain, there are currently 13 different locks, each with an elevation change of between 4 and 6 meters, allowing boats to make the journey. Requiring very little power, in the 1800s this was by far the most efficient way to move large quantities of materials to and from New York. There's a practical limit on how large a lock can be, and that limit dictates the size of the boat. The original lock system was completed in 1823 and enlarged in 1862. It could accommodate boats about 88 feet long and 14 feet wide, so that was how large the canal boats were. At the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, we check out the Lois McClure, a reproduction of a period canal schooner. Canal schooners were sail-rigged boats that could travel across the lake on wind power, then lower the sails, pull up the centerboard, and go through the locks being towed by horses from shore. Over the years, canal schooners developed a very specific design for this very specific task. And underwater on the wreck, we can see that design clearly. There are windows in the stern. This section of the boat was the crew quarters. Like many canal vessels, it was both a workboat and a home. One of the O.J. Walker's captains lived on board with his family for over 9 years. After a 45-minute dive, it's time to head back to the surface. We ascend slowly and do a safety decompression stop, and it feels good to rise back into the warmth of the surface waters. Back at the museum, we meet Chris Sabick, the Director of Archaeology and Research. Even though the museum is closed during COVID, we get a private tour. Inside, we see an exhibit on the O.J. Walker. We also see an exhibit on the next wreck we're going to dive, the General Butler. This exhibit includes a large collection of artifacts from the wreck. In the winter of 1876, a powerful storm hit the General Butler as the crew was attempting to get her to the safety of the harbor. The steering linkage broke, and the wind blew the boat right into the breakwater, so close to the harbor. The captain and crew managed to jump off the boat onto the breakwater before she sank. The next day, the weather has turned rainy, but the wind is down. We're gonna get wet anyway, so a little rain won't hurt us. Woo! Woo! We sink down the mooring line to only 40 feet because the General Butler is so shallow right off the breakwater. The wreck is also part of the historic preserve. Being so shallow, the zebra mussels are even more numerous in the warm water. But the fish seem to love the warm, shallow water too. There's a huge school of perch. Sheila shows me the giant hole in the hull where the boat hit the breakwater. As a classic canal schooner, the Butler has the same basic stern design as the O.J. Walker. As Sheila and I head back towards the bow, we're surrounded by fish. And while it's not unusual to see large numbers of fish aggregate around wrecks in the ocean, I can't remember ever seeing this many fish on a freshwater wreck. The perch are being chased by bass. Hey, you guys, this is a historical wreck. You're not allowed to go in there. Finally, Sheila leads us back to the mooring line to head back to the surface. Diving the canal schooners of Lake Champlain was great fun and a fascinating look into American history. I never expected diving in a lake to offer so much excitement. There are dozens of wrecks in Lake Champlain, and we filmed several of them. So stay tuned for more Lake Champlain adventures in the Blue World. The seahorse. It's one of the most mysterious animals in the ocean. Few people have ever seen one in person. And for scuba divers, finding one of these cryptic, camouflaged fish on a dive is considered grounds for bragging rights. Seahorses are contained within the subfamily Hippocampini, which loosely translated from ancient Greek means horse-like sea monster. And while they certainly have a horse-like head, monster is a bit of a stretch, considering that most seahorses are only a few inches tall, and the largest one in the world is only a tad over a foot tall. Seahorses are part of a family of fish called Syngnathidae, which means fused jaws. This family of fish includes not only the seahorses, but similar fishes known as pipefish.
The fused jaw means that seahorses and pipefish can't open their mouths very wide. If I was a seahorse, I'd have a very hard time eating a sandwich. Get in my belly.
Seahorses and pipefish all have fused jaws, elongated snouts, a lack of pelvic fins, and a body covered in thick bony plates, making them somewhat unappetizing to predators. Pipefish in general look like eels with a seahorse head. They come in all colors and have become quite specialized for their environments. For example, the robust ghost pipefish has evolved to mimic seagrass. It floats within the seagrass undetected until it can grab some prey, like a tiny shrimp or copepod. The ornate ghost pipefish has frilly projections that make it look a little like a feather star. It can camouflage easily among feather stars while waiting for prey. There's even a remarkable pipefish that looks exactly like Halimeda algae. While pipefish tend to be swimmers, seahorses have mostly become adept at not swimming. They have a prehensile tail for hanging on to things and staying very still to avoid detection. Some seahorses have taken camouflage to a very high degree of sophistication. The pygmy seahorse, only a centimeter tall, looks just like the sea fan in which it lives. If it doesn't move, it's almost impossible to find. A large sea fan may host a dozen or more of these tiny inhabitants, but predators swim right by and never know they're there. In Australia, the leafy sea dragon has made itself almost invisible within seaweed with its stunning camouflage. And while this fish definitely looks like a seahorse, sea dragons are actually more closely related to pipefish. The weedy sea dragon, also found around Australia, definitely looks more like a pipefish than a seahorse. And another member of the family which defies easy classification, the pygmy pipehorse, which looks like a cross between a seahorse and a pipefish. But the taxonomy experts tell us they are pipefish that look like seahorses, not seahorses that look like pipefish. All seahorses and pipefish share one reproductive trait. The males care for the eggs. Most fish just release their eggs into the water and leave their fate to chance. But seahorses and pipefish protect their eggs until they hatch, giving their babies a little better chance to survive. Because the female expends a lot of energy making the eggs, it's only fair that the male spends his energy protecting them. Some pipefish males carry their eggs around on their body until they hatch. But other pipefish and the seahorses actually have a little pouch, like a kangaroo, where the eggs stay safe until they hatch. And when they start hatching, it must tickle, because the proud father immediately pushes them out into the world. At this point, the babies are on their own. No parental care or college tuition. Because seahorses and pipefish can't open their mouths very wide, they feed in a special manner called pivot feeding, where the seahorse snaps its head quickly, forming a small vacuum in the mouth which sucks in the prey. Occasionally, a seahorse might literally bite off more than it can chew. And sometimes the food fights back. While seahorses and pipefish are mostly found in tropical oceans, a few species can be found in cooler, temperate waters. For example, the northern pipefish, found in the North Atlantic as far north as Newfoundland, Canada. I filmed this guy in Massachusetts. Pipefish go back further in the fossil records than seahorses, and most taxonomists believe that seahorses are the newest members of the family, basically highly adapted pipefish. And a recent study on their genome indicates that seahorses are one of the fastest evolving fish ever studied. So who knows, maybe in a few hundred years they will be sea monsters. That would certainly make diving even more fun. In the meantime, seahorses and pipefish are among the most magical and wondrous fish in the sea. It's certainly one of my favorite things to see on any dive in the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
It's a beautiful day in Eastport, Maine. This small, scenic city on the New England coast is located on Passamaquoddy Bay, as far north as you can go on the coast of Maine before you hit Canada. Eastport's my favorite place to be in the summer, with perfect down east weather. Passamaquoddy Bay is an inlet off the Bay of Fundy, world-renowned for its extreme tides. With a tidal range of more than 20 feet, water really moves in and out of the bay at speeds exceeding 10 knots, creating turbulence visible from the air.
We've done segments here before, but I wanted to introduce Zach of all trades to Gene, the world-famous wolffish. Are you excited?
Oh, I'm so excited.
Do you think you're gonna be able to stay warm in this Arctic water?
Are you kidding me? I have my Snyder suit. I can do anything.
Let's go. Also, I have this cool new macro lens to try out, which allows me to film really small creatures, so I'm excited to try filming some of the miniature marine life in the bay. The Blue World team and I are diving from our backyard, the Blue World Dive Shack. Because of the strong tides, we can only dive during a short period of time when the tide changes and the water is slack. Slack lasts about an hour, so our timing has to be perfect. It's agony to put on a dry suit on a hot summer day. Then you get all sweaty walking to the water. But once you get into the water, it feels great. Sinking down, we are disappointed to discover bad visibility. Like, really bad. The water is never particularly clear here, but this is something else altogether. Even though I've completed more than 200 dives on this site, I'm having a hard time finding my way around. Passamaquoddy Bay is full of colorful stuff like anemones, sea stars, and sponges, and they're pretty small. Fortunately, we don't need great visibility to film small stuff. I have my super close-up lens with me, so I start looking for small stuff. A purple smooth sunstar with 10 arms can grow to more than a foot across, but this one's only a few inches. I look to my left and notice that I'm being watched by a small fish known as a grubby. It's a type of sculpin, a bottom-dwelling fish that relies upon its camouflage for protection. I'm pretty sure it thinks I can't see it and doesn't swim away. Only an inch long, a nudibranch is sort of like a snail with no shell. The colorful bristles called serrata on its back are a combination of gills and defensive organs. Each serratum has a stinging cell in the tip for defense. But its body cannot manufacture these stinging cells. Instead, the nudibranch eats various species of hydroids, basically tiny non-swimming jellyfish, and recycles the hydroid's stinging cells. Nudibranchs are simultaneous hermaphrodites, meaning they're both male and female. So when any two meet up, they can mate and produce a tiny ribbon of eggs for the next generation. Some nudibranchs mimic their habitat for protection. The bushy-backed nudibranch lives in algae or kelp and can be quite hard to spot. Just below the low tide line, I come across a green crab. Although this crab is quite common throughout New England waters, it's actually a foreign invader. Originating in the waters of the Northeast Atlantic around Europe, this sneaky little crab has spread around the world, mostly because its planktonic larvae get a free ride in the ballast water of ships. They like to eat baby clams, mussels, and scallops, which means they're not particularly welcome in Maine, where scallops are big business. Fortunately, lots of animals like to eat green crabs. Meet Jane the wolffish. She is particularly fond of green crabs and does her part to keep the population under control. Jane and Bob are two of our local wolffish.
They live together in a big den under a rock. We named them after our neighbors because they're such a cute couple. We're not sure what Bob likes to eat, but Jane keeps an eye peeled for crabs. A crab shell is no match for these teeth. Any crab that wanders into this neighborhood is in big trouble. Jane would probably eat a decorator crab too, but she never sees any. The decorator crab has camouflage made from marine growth and moves slowly. If this crab doesn't move, it's almost invisible, even to Jane the wolffish. The rock crab is the most common crab in this most crabby place, with a face only a mother could love. And it's mating season. The male carries the female around for days until she molts, because they can only mate when her new shell is soft. Her soft shell will make her vulnerable to predators, but the male will protect her. And when the mating is done, the crabs are hungry. It's a crab-eat-crab world, and rock crabs will happily devour any green crab they can catch. This crab has nothing to fear, though. Hermit crabs live in recycled snail shells, making them very tough. It's like living in a portable bunker. They feed with busy mouthparts on tiny invertebrates and detritus. At the other end of the scale, this crustacean also has little to fear. The American lobster is the king of the local crustaceans. This one's eating a mussel that it cracked open with a powerful crusher claw. It's time to introduce Zach of all trades to Gene, the famous wolffish, so we make our way over to his den. Gene has lived here for more than 20 years, and he's so big that he barely fits through his front door to the huge den within. Christine shows Zach how it's done, coaxing Gene out of his den with a delicious snack. The entrance to the den is so small, sometimes Gene has a hard time squeezing back through. Next, it's Zach's turn. He's a little apprehensive about getting his fingers chomped, but Gene is actually quite gentle with us. He's a good fishy. After an hour, the tide has started to turn, and the current is starting to run, so we make our way up to shallower water for a short safety stop. In the shallows, we're greeted by a lion's mane jelly, one of the more potent jellyfish in the world, so we're careful to steer clear of the stinging tentacles. But even the mighty lion's mane can be prey. If the current pushes a lion's mane down too close to the bottom, it can get snagged and become the victim of an army of sea urchins, slowly advancing and oblivious to its tentacles. The cold waters of Passamaquoddy Bay are a far cry from diving in the clear waters of a tropical coral reef. But the marine life hidden in the cold green water here is every bit as fascinating and engaging as marine life anywhere in the world. And by diving here so often, I've been able to get to know some of the residents quite well. Every time I step into the water in Eastport, I feel like I'm visiting old friends, a reunion in the blue world. The island of Cozumel, just off the coast of Mexico near Cancun, is known for its crystal clear water. Divers flock to this scuba diving paradise to see healthy reefs and lots of marine life. The splendid toadfish, one of the local marine rock stars, is found around only 2 islands in the world. Further offshore, reef sharks sometimes sleep in caves, a behavior that has not been witnessed anywhere else. And Cozumel has something else unique in the world. This special cenote containing species found nowhere else on Earth. Cameraman Todd and I head on down to Cozumel for a cave diving adventure. We team up with our favorite local cave diving guide, Christine Lowe. Then we head on over to Aerolito Cenote. It's bigger than most of the cenotes we dive. It almost looks like a pond. And it's only a couple of 100 meters from the ocean, which is one of the things making Aerolito special. Even though the surface water is fresh, down deeper it turns to salt water because it's connected directly to the ocean. And because of that, it has some marine life unique to this environment.
So one of the great things about Aerolito is an added element of excitement. Apparently, there are crocodiles.
We go over our plan. Christine has been here before, but we haven't. So we'll be following her. Then it's time to get our gear together and suit up.
Time to get wet.
As we put our gear on and kick up the bottom of the algae-filled water, I try not to think about crocodiles. Once we get underwater and swim away from the silt we kicked up, we can see much better and follow Christine into a small cave opening. Due to our proximity to the ocean, the halocline is quite shallow. We pass through this swirly barrier between the freshwater and the saltwater at a depth of only 20 feet. Todd and I follow as Christine runs a reel from the entrance back to the permanent cave line. The permanent line starts pretty far from the entrance to discourage open water divers from following it. It takes a while, but eventually we find the permanent line and Christine ties in. Even this far in, the greenish tint of the algae-filled pond water persists. Then we find something spectacular, a cave brittle star. This species of brittle star is found nowhere else on Earth except this one cave. Like many cave-adapted organisms, it has lost much of its pigment, and it can detect the presence of light, This survival skill causes the brittle star to run from my flashlight. As I look around, I realize that there are quite a few of these brittle stars, all running from our lights. But here's the most amazing thing. Aerolito is the only cave in the world known to have cave-adapted sea stars. But it's not just this one species of brittle star. There are actually 3 species of sea stars in here, and I'm hoping to find all of them. Our search takes us deeper and shallower, at times getting shallow enough to enter the halicline again. But we know the sea stars all live below this depth, in the salt water. So we travel further into the cave, taking a passage that goes in the opposite direction as the ocean, traveling further inland, seeking deeper passages. But the cave never gets very deep, and we stay close to the halicline, not the most likely place to find our elusive sea stars. Finally, a crack that drops deeper into the salty layer, below the influence of the tides which cause the halicline to rise and fall. Christine scours the walls of the cave with her light, casting an experienced eye for cave life. And then we swim down another crack even deeper. Now we're really getting into the realm of the unknown. We end up in a dark tube with odd, dark-colored limestone and a gravel bottom. There are almost no speleothem formations. It's a spooky place. Soon we start seeing signs of ocean life. Little orange sponges dot the walls. We press on, watching our limited air supply and pushing deeper into the cave. I watch the floor of the cave carefully as we go. At last, a white splotch that looks like another sponge, but the pentagonal shape gives it away. This is one of the rarest sea stars in the entire world, a cave-adapted type of asteroid similar to one seen on reefs around the Caribbean. But here in Aerolito, it has lost all pigmentation and lives entirely in the dark. What it eats is not known. And we struck gold because right nearby, the monster of this cave. Copidaster cavernicola. This large sea star, reaching about a foot across, is also a cave-adapted relative of a deep-water species seen in the ocean. But unlike the others, this sea star hasn't lost all its pigmentation. That may mean that it hasn't been long enough to fully adapt. Give it another 200 generations over 1,000 years and we'll check back. Having found our 3 species of sea stars, we turn and make our long swim back towards the entrance. Plastic line arrows always point the way out, so we know we're going the right way. We pass fields of brittle stars on a sandy section of the cave. There must be something they like to eat in or on the sand. and we find another magnificent cavernicola snuggled up to a sponge. Sponges, in fact, are everywhere. As we get closer to the entrance, we're also getting closer to the ocean, and the water contains more organic materials for the sponges to eat. And the sponges are crawling with brittle stars. Finally, we make it back to our reel, and Christine unties it from the main line. We're back to the cavern zone where we can see sunlight streaming in. After a few minutes doing a safety stop, we can head back up into the sunlight, keeping an eye peeled for crocs, of course.
How you doing?
Woo! Haha! I am back from the cave!
Aerolito is a fascinating cenote. It doesn't really have any beautiful formations, but its location and conditions are just right for it to have unique marine life found nowhere else in the world. And, at the moment at least, it's the only cave in the world known to contain cave-adapted sea stars. You never know what you might find just exploring the depths of a small algae-filled pond. It's another incredible wonder of the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
The Big Island of Hawaii. It's an ocean lover's paradise with clear, warm water, lush tropical vegetation, and plenty of seashore activities. And of course, the underwater environment is even better. But not all the great diving is on the reef or during the day. After the sun goes down, divers go looking for creatures of the abyss. We've sent cameraman Zach and Annalise to Hawaii to check out this exciting activity.
We're here in wonderful Kona, Hawaii. Normally Jonathan would be here with us, but he said something about being chained to his desk. But we're out here without him and we're diving.
And today we are gonna go meet up with a friend who's gonna show us some Blackwater critters.
Chained to a desk?
Yeah, that's just what we told him.
No, we're down in Florida doing our own Blackwater dive.
Here we go.
So, while Zach and Annalise are exploring the waters off Kona in the middle of the Pacific, we will be almost 5,000 miles away in the Atlantic, just off the coast of West Palm Beach in Florida. We're diving with Bill Walker's Dive Adventures on his boat, The Wetter the Better. But we have a while until the sun goes down.
Meanwhile, back in Hawaii, Zach and I are diving with Kona Honu divers on the Honolele. But first we have to wait for the sun to go down. As night falls, the boat makes its way into the harbor and is ready for passengers. We load all of our gear onto the boat and begin setting up gear before leaving the dock and heading out into the darkness.
In Florida, it started to rain. But like the boat says, the wetter the better. Soon we're ready to depart, and Dive Master Autumn Sherman unties the boat. Then Zach of all trades and I get a dive briefing from John Phillips. He explains that we're going to be floating along with the current in the open ocean. The crew lowers a bright array of lights that hangs from a buoy. They don't hang it from the boat because the wind blows the boat, The buoy goes with the current at the same speed as the divers, but that's not how they do it in Hawaii.
Dive guide Jeff, who actually wrote the book on Blackwater diving, gives us our dive briefing. We're doing our Blackwater dive a little differently. We'll all be individually tethered to the boat and stick together as a group, so that way nobody gets lost or floats away. Jeff still places a safety light in the water so that we'll all still be able to orient ourselves around it. Now it's time to gear up.
And separated by almost 5,000 miles, we all hit the water in search of the coolest critter.
We all descend down our lines and get accustomed to the darkness at a depth of about 65 feet. The current is pretty strong down here, and I'm trying not to think about the almost 7,000 feet of water below me. I'm kind of glad that I'm tethered into the boat.
Floating in the open ocean, our only reference is the bright lights hanging down from the buoy. Up above, the boat captain follows the buoy. When we float away from the buoy, it gets really dark.
We start to see some really cool stuff. A pteropod swims by. You can see its little fins working hard to propel it through the water. These are called sea butterflies because as they swim, their fins emulate the flapping wings of a butterfly. Looks like this guy has caught himself a nice dinner out in the ocean. We find an animal called a comb jelly that is actually not a jellyfish, but something called a ctenophore. Ctenophores are similar to jellyfish, except that they don't sting. A ribbon-shaped ctenophore called a Venus girdle floats by in the current. Comb jellies are everywhere. There's even a comb jelly who caught himself a salp. Apparently everyone is out looking for dinner tonight. Speaking of salps, they also seem to be abundant. This one has a little amphipod hitching a ride.
Zach and I are also seeing a lot of salps. Salps are planktonic tunicates, which are a kind of simple animal with two siphons. They pump water through their body to move and to feed. They remind me of a jet engine with no airplane attached. Some salps grow in colonies that are linked together like a chain. These chained salps are harmless to people, but they're deadly to the small plankton they devour. We also find lots of cool little jellies. They might look adorable, but some of them pack quite a sting.
Hey, we also see one of those. This jellyfish is in the genus Merga, and it has a larval amphipod hiding inside it. Dive guide Jeff points out the coolest thing yet. This is an apolemia, also known as a net-casting siphonophore. These are some of the longest animals in the world, sometimes reaching up to 30 meters long.
Siphonophores might look like chained salps, but they are hydroids, which are related to jellies, so they can sting. Speaking of siphonophores, we're finding lots of them. Talk about a plankton-hunting sea monster. This siphonophore has a defense mechanism when it senses my camera. Some of the animals found in this environment are in their larval phase, like this anemone larva. When it matures, it will settle down on a reef and become a familiar-looking anemone. Animals that mature to live on reefs use this planktonic larval phase in order to travel great distances to populate new reefs.
We've just found something super rare. Pelagic seahorses almost never appear on Blackwater dives. Here, this little fish decides to hang out with Jeff. Pelagic seahorses spend their entire lives drifting in the currents of the ocean. They spend their days at depth for shelter, but at night come nearer to the surface to feed. Ironically, this fish that adapted attributes for life on a reef will never actually spend any time camouflaged in the coral. She seems to want to take a break from the ocean current and perches on Jeff's fingers.
Back in Florida, we find a swimming brain. Well, it looks like a brain. This animal is called a larvacean. It's actually related to a salp, a tiny pelagic tunicate that swims with a flapping tail like a tadpole. It generates an enormous bubble-like net called a house to catch prey. This house, made of protein and cellulose, gets discarded regularly when it gets clogged up. We also see juvenile fish. This larval dragonfish looks to me like Randall from Monsters, Inc., which is no surprise because it's going to look like this when it's mature.
We're seeing a bunch of juvenile fish as well. Only fish with a very long juvenile stage can reach Hawaii from other islands. Here's an indigo dartfish. There's also a juvenile Moorish idol. This is a fish that we commonly see as adults on the Hawaii reef. We see a juvenile squirrelfish as it floats by. Jeff points out his favorite fish, a juvenile longjaw flounder. We're interrupted by something unexpected. An oceanic white-tipped shark comes out of the darkness and appears to be curious about us. He investigates our safety light and hangs around for a little bit. Most people see their first shark on a reef dive with bait, but I'm really lucky to see my first on a Blackwater dive like this.
We didn't find any sharks, but we did find what is considered to be the holy grail of Florida Blackwater diving, the scalloped ribbon fish. This is a pelagic deep water species that lives its entire life in the deep open ocean. It's shiny like a mirror and makes filming really difficult because it reflects my lights right back into the lens. This is an adaptation for camouflage in open water. Biologists suggest that the long, thin, filament-shaped fins are an adaptation for mimicry, making this fish resemble a jelly, deterring predators. This is considered such a great find because they're so rarely seen. We really got lucky on our first Blackwater dive. Beginner's luck. Finally, it's time to head back to the boat.
The shark seems to have moved on, and we're getting ready to head back to the boat, but not before a surprise visit from a mobula ray. This is the first time dive guide Jeff has ever seen one of these on a Blackwater dive. Okay, that was the coolest dive ever. I saw my first shark guys and seahorses all over the place.
Blackwater diving can be a little spooky, but it's such a unique diving experience and a chance to see things that we would never see during the day or diving on a reef. With only one dive in the Pacific and one dive in the Atlantic, we saw an amazing amount of stuff. But we barely scratched the surface of what's out there. Who knows what we might find on our next Blackwater dive? in the blue world. The Santa Fe River meanders its way through northern Florida. Along the way, it's fed by many springs, including the Devil's Spring System, which is famous with cave divers.
I've done a fair number of cave dives, but I've never done a really high flow cave. So I'm here at the Devil's Spring System in Florida to check it out. Behind me, one of the entrances to the cave is marked by a buoy. It's practically in the Santa Fe River. The river's got this kind of brown, tannic water, and the water coming out of the spring is crystal clear. So when they mix, you get kind of cool colors, and I can't wait to check that out.
The Devil's Spring System consists of 3 springs. Little Devil creates a short spring run out to the Santa Fe River, where there are 2 more, Devil's Eye and Devil's Ear. Cameraman Todd, cameraman Zach, and I are not the only ones unloading gear to dive this amazing spot. As we bring our gear to the steps, we can see down the spring run to the river. I can't wait to get in the water.
First you go up.
There's really nothing to change.
Big battery.
How you doing there, Todd?
Getting there good.
Devil's Eye is a short swim down the spring run. And there it is. It's a little deceiving. From above, you can't really see how much water is coming out of this hole in the ground. Dropping down, we can see the entrance to the cave. Today I got real duty, which means I have to run our safety line from outside the cave into the main guideline, which is down by the warning sign. Each team runs its own reel for this part of the dive, both to keep track of how many teams are in the cave and so that we have a continuous guideline out to the light. After I tie into the main cave line, we can continue into the cave. The flow of water coming out of this cave is stronger than it looks on camera. We have to kick hard to make forward progress. That exertion uses a lot more air than we would use in other caves. Some sections of the cave are so large that there's no danger of kicking up sediment. so it's okay to use a more powerful flutter kick rather than a frog kick. In this section of cave, we can clearly see where water once flowed back when this cave was partially dry during the last ice age. Now, you might be wondering, where are all the stalactites? In our exploration of caves in Mexico and the Bahamas, we see beautiful speleothems, formations like stalactites and stalagmites formed by dripping water tens of thousands of years ago during the last ice age. Back then, sea levels were lower, and the caves were not filled with water. But here in Florida, the caves have almost no speleothems. According to geologists, it's because the water flow is so strong in these caves that it dissolved all the speleothems, leaving only these smooth passages behind. The rules of cave diving say that when you've used 1/3 of your air, you must turn around and start back. In this much flow, it doesn't take long for us to hit thirds because of the exertion. Soon we're drifting back out with the flow. We make it back to the entrance in a fraction of the time it took us to swim in. The good news is that we still have plenty of air, so we can go check out Devil's Ear. We swim through our own bubbles. Exhaled air in the cave collects on the ceiling and then slowly percolates through the porous limestone. It's like swimming in a big can of seltzer. Devil's Ear is located almost out in the river, so the clear water coming out of the spring mixes with the brown water in the river, making cool, swirling, psychedelic patterns. Wow, man. Down inside, I can look one way, and the water's brown. Then in the other direction, it's clear. The Devil's Spring system is a legendary cave diver's paradise stretching back thousands of feet from the entrance. We barely scratched the surface of this immense cave, so I guess that means we'll have to come back to this fascinating realm of the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, cinematographer. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
The Blue World team has traveled to the tropical island of Roatan to explore some of the healthiest reefs in the Caribbean. Roatan is an island located 40 miles off the coast of mainland Honduras in Central America. It's a popular vacation destination for North Americans, not only because of nice beaches and proximity to the U.S., but also because of the healthy marine environment. Zach, Diver Ed, and I start our day meeting Lindy Warren of Infinity Divers. Lindy is a very famous Roatan dive master, and we're lucky to have him to show us around.
Well, we're here in beautiful Roatan, Honduras. It's a beautiful day, and we're gonna do some nice tropical diving, baby. This is my favorite kind of diving, nice warm water. Check this out.
Roatan is known for super healthy coral reefs and a robust population of sea turtles. And while we have seen sea turtles many times, we're hoping to capture some really interesting behaviors. We tie up at a popular site known for really great coral and deep channels that bring clear water into the shallows.
I love the sand on the rig, that's great. Adds the flavor.
I'm gonna have a super easy and fun dive because I'm testing out my new IMAX camera. Actually, it's a GoPro Hero 10 that shoots in 5K. Even though Lindy has done more than 10,000 dives, he never gets bored of showing people these beautiful sights. He leads us down through a channel in the reef. It dumps us out on the wall at 110 feet. Here, the reef drops precipitously into the blue. The light down here is low, and the GoPro image quality is kinda noisy. We follow Lindy on a search for a sea turtle. Along the way, I can't help but notice all of the interesting sponges. I'm a sucker for a pretty sponge. Some of these barrel sponges grow quite large. And the beauty of a GoPro is getting an interesting perspective. Eventually, we find our first sea turtle. It's a small female hawksbill searching for lunch. She has some red algae on her shell. She could really use a few surgeonfish. I'm gonna call her Fuzzbutt. Even though sea turtles live their whole lives in the ocean, they're still reptiles and need to breathe air at the surface. So, every 5 to 10 minutes, a sea turtle must go up for a few breaths. Catch you later, Fuzzbutt. In the meantime, we have a look around. We find a few more lionfish. They might not belong here, but they are still one of the most beautiful fish on the reef. But don't touch, because those spines are extremely venomous. Speaking of venomous, the scorpionfish is easy to miss with that awesome camouflage, and this fish packs venomous dorsal spines too. I spy an indigo hamlet. They're a little more common here than in the rest of the Caribbean, but it's still a rare sight. Lindy is filming something with his GoPro, and another turtle comes down to investigate. Turtles can be quite curious, and they know that divers will not hurt them. This lady is hungry, and she's on a mission to find a snack. Finally, she finds her favorite food, which is a particularly tough sponge. Fish can't eat these sponges because they simply can't bite into them. And she's having a hard time too. Not many animals find sponges particularly good to eat. But sea turtles and a few species of fish can digest the tough fibers. Finally, she finds the perfect sponge and begins ripping it open. Almost immediately, a queen angelfish joins the party to mooch a few scraps. The angelfish could never eat this sponge without the turtle's help. Gets out fast. Soon, a gray angelfish shows up at the table. And then another. It's a full-on buffet. This sea turtle has a scar on her left side, maybe from a shark bite when she was younger. So I'm calling her shark bait. She doesn't mind if I get in close to watch. All this eating is making me hungry. This restaurant is pretty good, but she needs to breathe. While shark bait goes for a breath, two more hawksbills show up. Oh wait, it's Fuzzbutt, followed closely behind by another female hawksbill. I don't know where all the males are. Maybe they slept in. Fuzzbutt and the other hawksbill are circling around, almost as if they're trying to find something. A few minutes later, Fuzzbutt has somehow discovered Sharkbait's half-eaten sponge and picks up where she left off, biting off large chunks. The angelfish don't seem particularly picky about who they steal their scraps from. But soon, Sharkbait is back from her trip to the surface to breathe, and she's not happy to find Fuzzbutt eating her sponge. It comes to a head, and an argument breaks out. It looks violent, but they're not really hurting each other. Eventually, Fuzzbutt swims away, leaving Sharkbait to continue feeding on her sponge. I'm really excited to witness this interesting behavior. Who knew that fish could take advantage of a sea turtle's strong jaws? We might have scuba gear allowing us to breathe underwater, but like the sea turtles, we must eventually surface as well. And all that feeding action is making me hungry, so it's time to head back to the dock for lunch. The beautiful reefs of Roatan certainly did not disappoint. From the coral swim-throughs to the abundance of fish, and of course the amazing sea turtles, Roatan is a lovely place to explore the blue world.
Don't go away. Jonathan and Todd are going to squeeze into the smallest cave they've ever attempted.
It's a beautiful day on Merritt's Mill Pond. Located in Marianna, Florida, just west of Tallahassee, this small man-made lake contains entrances to 7 different caves. Today, cameraman Todd, Zach of all trades, and I are looking for one of the smallest caves on the pond. We rented a pontoon boat to explore as many of the caves as we can manage in our short visit. We head north from our rental house in search of Shangri-La Cave. It's easy to find because of the crystal clear water surrounding the entrance. We pull our boat gently into the shallow water near shore. There's a small metal post to tie off the boat.
But a lasso, a little more. That one's on.
Next to us, clear water flows strongly from this spring. It's the kind of inviting water that cave divers crave. We got some pointers from local instructor Mehdi Zanetti, so we know this is going to be a very tight cave, which sounds fun. With this in mind, we suit up for some adventure. We have a quick peek inside so we can figure out our plan. We have a short chat and decide to bring only GoPro cameras because our regular cameras are too big for this cave.
The main line, but I couldn't see where the main line really began.
At last, we begin the dive with Todd leading the way. If you think the entrance looks small, you haven't seen anything yet.
We fight our way in against the flow and discover it's a pretty spacious cavern zone.
We have only a single video light to keep the GoPro rig small. follow Todd into the cave while he ties off our reel. Heading further into the cave, we quickly arrive at a tiny restriction going down into the floor. And that's the only way to proceed, so Todd pushes on down. It's a tighter squeeze than it looks.
Once I get down in there, I can see the line, but there doesn't appear to be any easy way to follow it. The ceiling and floor are so close together, I'm wondering if I'll even fit.
From behind Todd, I can see the problem. Man, this is one tiny cave. Todd picks the biggest opening and starts heading that way. There's literally just enough room to squirm through. Up ahead, Todd follows the main line. We expected the cave to open up once we got through the first restriction, and it has, but not very much. I'm hanging back far enough that if we need to turn around, we won't be kicking each other too much. Thankfully, the floor of the cave is not super silty, and the silt we do manage to kick up is being washed away quickly in the flow of water. Todd continues his slow progression upstream into the cave. I have it a little easier because I'm following, but I have worse visibility being downstream.
Someone has laid line in here, so we know people can fit. Many had said that in order to go further, you'd have to remove both tanks. And it looks like we've reached that point.
Because I'm behind, I do a very clumsy turnaround and begin leading the way out.
I'm turning around as well, but there isn't much space.
Soon we're both turned around and heading out. At last, we claw our way back to the hole in the floor and emerge back into the cavern. As much as we enjoyed that little adventure, I think we're both glad to be back into a space large enough to swim. In 5 minutes, all the silt we kicked up will be totally gone.
It's time to head back to the light. Since we never exceeded 25 feet, we don't even have to do a safety stop.
Oh, man.
That restriction at the end where I turned, I don't think I could fit through without taking a tank off. So I went as far as I could.
It looked bigger inside than it was.
And even as I went further, as far as I could see into that next area, it was the same low ceiling and mud. But, I tried that second time trying to get through, and it's just like I have to take a tank off. It's just not quite wide enough.
Yeah.
Or I gotta stop eating the pizza.
Yeah, one or the other.
Shangri-La is one of the smallest caves in Merritt's Mill Pond. It's not deep, and it doesn't go very far. But it's an incredible dive for adventurous side-mount cave divers. Meanwhile, we have many other caves to explore in this extraordinary pond and the Blue World.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than they are today. Many cave entrances that formed back then are now hidden under the surface of the ocean. Cameraman Todd and I have traveled to Key Cocker, just off the coast of Belize, to explore a famous ocean cave. We arrive at Sunrise Scuba and immediately realize that we're going to have some challenging conditions today. Normally, we don't worry about wind when we're cave diving, but when the entrance to the cave is in the ocean, the surface conditions matter. We leave the dock with Captain Max Novello at the helm. Before we can even think about diving, we have to find the cave entrance. As we get close to the cave, a squall blows in and conditions are getting rough. I'm using a GPS app on my cell phone to help find the entrance. Unfortunately, we can't see it through the water because the storm has churned up the bottom and made the ocean milky. Our dive master, cave explorer Ilya Rosado will attempt to locate the cave by scuba. While he looks for the cave, Todd and I start pulling our gear together. Soon Ilya has found the cave and marks it with a buoy. It doesn't seem like great conditions for a dive, but in theory it should be fine once we get inside the cave. I'm anxious to get going and get out of this wind. Underwater, things don't look good. The visibility is about 5 feet. We can barely see the entrance to the cave, even when we're right on it. Ilya heads down first, and we follow. Things aren't much better inside, and I'm starting to get a bad feeling about this dive. The first couple of 100 feet into the cave are terrible, and frankly, a little scary. Ilya places an arrow on the line, which is overgrown with marine growth. As the tides come and go, ocean water is pulled in and out of the cave, so bad visibility can come with it. But slowly, as we push on, getting further and further from the ocean, things start to clear up. About 500 feet from the entrance, we can finally see, and we realize why it's called Winter Wonderland. Particles drawn in from the ocean settle like snow on the formations. But the floor of this cave is pure silt, and we have to stay way up off the bottom to avoid creating a silt out. As we progress further into the cave, the water continues to get clearer, but our bubbles are knocking particles off the ceiling. It really does look like a scene out of a Christmas movie. Eventually, we enter a section of the cave where the calcite formations are almost black instead of white like most caves. Scientists think it's caused by bacteria that cover the formations during a period when the water levels are down. I can't get over the fact that literally every formation in here is black. It looks like soot covering everything, and with the white silt, it has a winter wonderland feel for sure. We reach a place where we can't really go much further easily, so it's time to turn around. Now we follow the guideline back out. We know that we're getting closer to the entrance as the visibility goes down. Back in the cavern zone, we pick up our oxygen stage bottles for decompression. This dive reached 150 feet deep, so we have about 20 minutes of deco. We start at 20 feet in the cave, then progress to 10 feet just above the cave. The visibility is so bad that we have to follow the anchor line back to the boat.
Woo! It got better at the end. Once we got past all the silt.
Well, I gotta say, that was a lot of work for a cave dive. But it was fun!
The good thing about cave diving is that caves stay right where you left them. However, caves in the ocean can present challenges. Our expedition to Winter Wonderland was not without challenges, but this fascinating cave was well worth the effort. Without question, it was the most interesting ocean cave I've yet seen in the Blue World.
Don't go away. Jonathan and Todd explore a mysterious cave. But first, a night dive on the reefs of Belize.
The Central American nation of Belize is known for some of the most spectacular diving in the Caribbean, with crystal clear water and healthy coral reefs. Located between Mexico and Honduras, this small country is a scuba diver's dream destination. Zach and I are diving with the Belize Aggressor 3, a live-aboard dive boat.
All right.
We eat, sleep, and dive from this luxury yacht. But the diving doesn't end when the sun goes down. We're suiting up for a night dive. Once the sun has set, we hit the water in search of adventure.
Woohoo! Grab Eddie's fish. Time for a night dive.
Just as lights attract insects above water, they attract plankton underwater. Zach and I are quickly swarmed by bug-like plankton because of our powerful video lights. The local tarpon population has learned to use the divers' lights to their benefit, zooming around us eating the plankton. The coral polyps open up at night to capture plankton with stinging tentacles. I like to bring my light close to the coral to feed them. You might ask, why dive at night? Because the animals on the reef are completely different at night. For example, nocturnal animals like the Caribbean king crab hide in the reef during the day and only come out to feed after dark. The octopus is another example. They're much too vulnerable to predators during the day, so they hide. But at night, they become the predators. An octopus uses long, sucker-equipped arms to reach into cracks and crevices, looking for unwary sleeping fish. Like the octopus, a moray eel takes advantage of the fact that fish sleep in the reef. By slithering into holes, it can catch them off guard and corner them. Basket sea stars spread their finely branched arms to capture plankton like a net. However, they're so sensitive to light that when I try to film them, they immediately close up and hide. The basket star's distant cousin, the donkey-dung sea cucumber, is not afraid of light as it sifts through the sand for food. Yes, it's actually called a donkey-dung sea cucumber. I did not make that up. I find a stingray hunting. Like a living metal detector, the stingray uses his electrosensory system to find clams and worms buried in the sand. Stingrays have a sharp barb at the base of their tail for defense, but they don't use it unless they feel threatened. Soon my tank is getting low and it's time to head back to the boat. People who don't dive often imagine that night diving is scary and dangerous, but actually it's peaceful and fascinating because of all the different animals to be seen. It's a great way to spend an evening in the blue world. Merritt's Mill Pond in Marianna, Florida is filled with crystal clear water that originates at Jackson Blue Spring. But this diver's paradise actually has 7 diveable caves within its waters. Located about an hour west of Tallahassee, Merritt's Mill Pond is actually a long, skinny section of dammed-up river. We start our day getting our tanks filled at Cave Adventurers, Ed Sorensen's awesome dive shop right on the pond. Then, we load our pontoon boat and head out to find Hole-in-the-Wall Cave. To a non-cave diver, a dock in the middle of nowhere probably makes no sense, but it's right next to the cave.
Who keeps tying knots in this?
With our boat tied up, Todd and I start putting our gear together. Soon we begin the dive. Normally, Todd and I dive with a third diver who handles the lines so we can focus on filming. But today it's just the two of us, so I'm holding Todd's camera as he runs the reel. The beginning of the cave has an incredible chimney that drops straight down to more than 50 feet from just behind the stop sign. Down at the bottom of the chimney, Todd ties our reel into the main line. Once that's done, he can take his camera and off we go. The cave is quite murky today, so it's hard to illustrate just how large some of the rooms are. They go on beyond visibility. Much of the floor of this cave consists of extremely fine silt, so we have to be very careful to stay up away from the bottom. This makes filming a cave crayfish really hard. I have to basically float upside down with my feet way up high to film this little guy without kicking up a storm. Every time we leave a large room and the passage gets smaller, it opens back up again into another huge room. This cave is enormous. We swim past shelf-like formations that were clearly formed when the water was lower. This cave's passages go on for thousands of feet, but it's pretty deep, so we don't go too far before it's time to turn around. As we get back near the entrance, we start to see signs of the world above. Sticks and organic material that have worked their way into the cave. We pass through a medium-sized restriction and then back into the chamber at the base of the chimney. Now I'm carrying two cameras again while Todd is reeling our line in. We soon emerge back into the cavern zone and see the light of day. Out in the pond, a fishy welcoming committee greets us.
Wow. That was a big cave.
That is huge.
We saw the entrance and I'm like, oh, this is going to be small and like really, gnarly, tight cave.
Yeah.
And then once you get through that beginning, it just goes boom. And it's like, whoa.
It's just room after room after room of huge cave.
Huge open cave.
Hole-in-the-Wall Cave is a famous and popular dive in Merritt's Mill Pond. For our first dive there, the visibility was not great, so we didn't go too far. But this means that we're ready for a much further exploration on our next trip to this part of the Blue World.